All right. There is so much to catch up on from the last week of the portal. So many things have happened in the last 3-4 days, really, concerning a lot of our targets, concerning things happening here in Omaha. That there's going to be a lot to get through here, but we're going to try our best to do it. Some very interesting stories, some very interesting ways things played out. We are coming down to the last week before the deadline to enter the draft. We are still presumably waiting on decisions from Trey and Kalk. This is one of those things that the coaching staff may very well know what they're going to do. I have not heard yet of anything being leaked or kind of released out there. I think the smart money for most of the offseason has been on Trey leaving, Kalk staying. I've said before, my assumption is that they're both leaving until I hear anything else that's concrete. And there's been a lot of talk in the last few people in Jay's Twitter, like, oh, who's pretending to have sources and who's just reading off the Trilly Donovan Discord. Like, I'm kind of in neither of those boats. I have friends who are on the Trilly Discord, so I know what's happening on there. I have friends who are connected pretty highly with Creighton Athletics, but at the same time, I'm not pretending to be someone who has sources. I use, honestly, mostly just common sense whenever possible, thinking who we might pursue, what our role might be with them. Most of the time, I'm just guessing. The rest of the time, I'm just aggregating what I see, what I hear from people who might be a little more connected than me. So when I put together these graphics that have all of our portal involvements, that's not me knowing anything. That's just me listing what I see or even what I think. So how much of this you want to take seriously is completely up to you. Do you think I know all? Do you not? That kind of determines it. But either way, a lot of action in the portal this week, and not in a good way for us, because at least 4 guys that we were pretty seriously linked to committed elsewhere. Now, on its face, that's a bad thing. I think we'll get to why it's maybe not, and why, although it's right, I think, to be a little concerned, because honestly, if they're of the top 100 players in the portal that I was going through just a couple hours ago, I would say almost 70% of them either are committed or have a crystal ball. So you start looking at it like that and saying, yeah, it's the portal season's not over, but at the same time, yeah, the best options are getting scooped up, right? There's not going to be a whole lot left if we keep waiting, and we have at least 3 spots to fill, right? No matter what Trey and Kalk do, we have 3 open scholarships. And even if they both stay, we have to fill a starting 3, honestly, maybe 2 wings. And you could debate backup center depending on what they're going to do with Trout, but either way, right? You know that minimum you have 2 additions to make even without them leaving. You have to find 2 wings. Now, they don't necessarily have to be top end of the portal quality. You really just need one of those players if they both stay, but you can't count on that, right? So I guess that's my point is, unless they know something that we don't know, which is certainly possible, and again, I don't mean to pretend to know what the coaching staff is discussing. It was a disappointing week, right? We'll kind of go through some of the guys that committed this week. So Amari Williams was the big one that I really didn't have any insight onto how his recruitment was playing out. It seemed for a little bit that we were maybe going to be the favorites just because of other options filling their spots. At one point, he had a top 4, and 2 of the 4 ended up signing a big man before he committed, and the other one was St. John's. So if it was coming down to just us and them, I felt pretty good about that. Depending on what I talked about this in last week's portal episode, that it's hard to make promises to a recruit. Even if we say no that Kalk's leaving, are they going to believe that necessarily until he actually says he's going, right? So if we're telling Amari Williams, hey, we're expecting you to come in and be our 28 minutes a game center, I don't know if he can believe that, right? So if he has an option somewhere else where he has a pretty good feeling that he's at least going to be a starting center, he's got to take it. And so Kentucky comes along late after he released his top 4. He agrees to take a visit to Kentucky, and as of yesterday, he commits there. So Kentucky's got a big for the upcoming season. We lose out on the only big target that we've been confirmed to be heavily in the running. There's a couple others that we'll get to that we've been kind of involved with. Micah Parrish. So this one happened late last week. Supposedly, and again, this is a source, but I think I've heard it from more than one place now, that Mac went out to visit Parrish, and he ended up committing to Ohio State the other day. He was, I think I've talked about him enough on Twitter. I wasn't super crazy about him as an addition. He's a big physical player, starter at San Diego State for this year. Good defender, but wasn't a great offensive threat. 9 points in 28 minutes. It would have been what we kind of talked about, like the different kind of player that Creighton's looking for, right? That's you put him in as a 6'6" wing who can probably guard 4 positions, and you say, all right, that gives us a little bite, that gives us a little toughness. So, yeah, I would have liked to see him added because at nothing else, I think he's a kind of player that even if you sign him, you maybe still go out and look for another option at the wing, a more offensive option. I don't think that adding him would stop us from going anywhere else, is what I'm saying. Same went for Roddy Gale, the Ohio State player who's now committed to Michigan. He was a little bit more effective of a scorer, a little better of an athlete, a little worse of a defender. Again, like same line of thought as Parrish, though, where it's get more athletic, score in different ways. And it also seemed like he was going to be we were pretty heavily in contention for him too. So we're already at 3 guys that we thought we really had a shot with that decided to go elsewhere. So not great. But none of them are players where I thought our portal season depended on it. Amari Williams is one of the 5 or 6 probably best bigs available. Or was, I should say, because a lot of them have signed now. Or are closer to signing, I should say. And he was the only one that we've been linked to. So it's a little bit concerning. Dante Maddox Jr., we were in on him. I don't think we ever were truly in his top 3. He was expected to cut down to a top 4 that didn't include us, and it was a surprise when we were the 5th team in his top 5. He ended up going to Xavier, which that kind of hurts, right? You're talking about an in-conference transfer who shoots 40% from 3. I think he's a perfect player for that system, for what it's worth. I think I would expect him to compete for a starting role there, if not grab it. Xavier is sneaky deep this year. If they have a healthy situation at their 2 forward positions, they will be tough this year. Xavier will not be finishing, 9th in the Big East again? Yeah, that won't be happening this year. And then MJ Amy from San Jose State. This was a weird one. People kept trying to convince me that he was a starter and not a bench player. People seem to take issue when I label these up transfers as bench players, which I don't really understand because this guy just committed to Loyola Marymount. We were in his top 5 with Loyola Marymount, Butler, and Cal. So if you want to say, okay, he was a starter on a bad San Jose State team, that does not make him a starter at Creighton University. Right, we can hold ourselves to the standard of we've been to 2 Sweet 16s in a row, 3 in the last 4 years. We don't have to take up transfers that we're not sure about and start them. And he was that for me. So yeah, I looked at him as like, if he goes to Butler, he might be able to find a role there, might carve something out. I think his best case was he's a DJ Davis, and that's, like if you're really looking in the portal for guards right now, you look and you say we could have done better than that. So we're not too bummed about losing out on that. I don't think the coaching staff was looking at him as a starting piece. And I say that because as I think we'll get to, apparently our staff's bar for what is a starting piece is higher than most people would think it is. And we'll get to that. St. Thomas. Boy, this one, I think I tweeted this, that this one came out of absolutely nowhere for me. So the Millard North kid went to Loyola Chicago for 2 years, spent last year at Northern Colorado. He's kind of a wing or a stretch four. 20-point-a-game player, 3-level scorer. Like this, for me, this was a top 5 ad that was available to us. Commits to USC out of nowhere this weekend. I had heard nothing about him. I had heard no rumblings whatsoever until this was done. So Musselman is doing a hell of... I hate him. I can't fucking stand him after Maui last year and all the other nonsense he pulls. Like, just such a cringe, weird, middle-aged guy. I can't really stand him, but doing a hell of a job in the portal this year. Again, I don't really know how he pulled this one off without too many people know. I know he's also kind of a hard guy to find information on, because if you search St. Thomas, you're not really gonna get to the bottom of what's going on with him. I really expected we would be involved, if not the favorites, to land him. I figure the Omaha connection would be enough to at least get him in for a visit, and we very well might have. Our coaching staff, I think, operates a little more quietly than most. But yeah, he's off the board, and he was a guy who I look at and I'm like, you slot him in as at the 3 next year and we'll be in business. But yeah, off the board, and so are soon to be these other 2. And somebody is going to be able to write a book about this transfer saga in the next couple of years, and they're going to make a little bit of money, because it has mystified the college basketball world in the sense that everyone seemed sure they knew what was going to happen, and then it didn't happen. And then even when it didn't happen, everyone seemed confused on what was actually going to happen next. So if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm talking about Hepburn and Fiddler. So the 2 Bellevue West kids that Fiddler entered the portal as has been expected since the beginning of the year. This was pretty much a done deal that he was going in the portal, and his options were pretty much guaranteed from go. It was either going to be Wisconsin, Nebraska, or Creighton. Like from the start, everyone, it was not a secret. He gets pretty much crystal balled to Wisconsin, with Michigan State getting his last visit and good things being reported out of it. So the story behind that is the report is that he was going to play with Chucky no matter what. That I was pretty sure he was going to go to Wisconsin, and it was kind of a mutual thing between the state schools, where I've heard from some pretty reliable people that neither Creighton or Nebraska considered him to be a surefire starter. That neither of them were willing to promise him starter minutes and a starter NIL package. So I take that for what it will, because I mean he's a great scorer, 20 points a game in the Summit League though, which is not the strongest low major competition, right? But anyways, so it seems all done. He's going to Wisconsin. He announces that he's committing at 8 a.m. on Monday on a local radio show last Monday. So then all of a sudden stuff starts to pop up that he's considering coming back to UNO, that he was going to announce on that radio show with the PA announcer for Omaha, or the radio guy for UNO, that he was going to come back. And all of a sudden that looked more likely than Nebraska or Creighton. So all of a sudden it was Wisconsin 1, Michigan State 2, Omaha 3. And we get to Monday morning and nothing happens. So he doesn't commit. He doesn't go on the show. And there's a delay, and everyone's kind of wondering what's happening. So there had been rumors about Chucky all offseason, mostly just by delusional Husker fans, but it seems like someone knew something. And then, so presumably, a couple of days before Fiddler was all set to commit to Wisconsin, Chucky enters the portal, or decides he's going to enter the portal. So it's either one of two ways this happened is either Chucky told Frankie, I'm entering the portal, so if you were coming here to play with me, don't come here. Or Frankie went on his Sparty visit and they either made him a great offer or he just decided he was going to play there. Because we are now in the situation where Chucky and Frankie are in the portal, right? The very first thing that was released, like right away when it happened, even before, so the Trilly post came out quickly where it said Creighton and Michigan State are the two options to land both of them. Crazy at that point, right? You're thinking, what? All of a sudden we're getting neither of them to we're getting both of them. We're not getting Frankie to we're getting both of them. And I had even before that came out, I had somebody texting me like, "Hey, I think it's a done deal." And to be fair, like this is a guy who I would consider a source who has steered me completely right on things in the past that I would have said were shocking. He broke the Nemhard transfer to me before anyone else had, so I consider this guy to be pretty reliable. And he said, he's like, I'm hearing that they might already have this done, and they might be Blue Jays already. So we're in this place, and I still, like, that's when I tweeted, like, don't be surprised if they both go to Michigan State, because Hogard just announced he was leaving there, and Izzo seemed like he was pissed about it and looking to add another guard. So my first instinct was they're both going to Michigan State. Here we are a week later, Chucky's going to Louisville. He got a crystal ball to Louisville. Supposedly they made him a $700K offer. I don't know the validity of that, right? Like the numbers you hear reported are almost always higher than they actually are. So he's going there, and Frankie looks set. He just got crystal balled to Michigan State. So now they're splitting up, and neither one is staying in Nebraska or Wisconsin, right? Like it's such a strange situation. I really don't know what to make of it. Like I said, somebody's going to need to write the tell-all on that in the next year or two. I will read the shit out of that, put it behind a paywall. I don't care. I'd be very interested to know all the details behind how this process shook out. Each team's involvement, I think, has to be a whirlwind. Because I heard some of the things Nebraska was doing to try and get him in. Like, they were making a heck of an effort. We had him in at a practice before the season had even ended. And then this Sparty visit seems to have knocked his socks off. Louisville, how they got involved. Like, I'd love to hear how this all happened. But the end story is that we're not getting either. And for a second there, you looked at that roster and you said, well, shit, all right. Chucky, Ashworth, Frankie, Mason or Jason, and Kalk. Like, that's a fun lineup, even if Trey doesn't come back. I share some of the doubts about Frankie, and Chucky has some limitations on offense. But, man, you look at that and you say, wow, we get two elite defenders. You still have good floor spacing. Ashworth gets to play off ball. Like, man, that's a fun roster. That could have been a really good roster. And that would have filled the gaps right away. So that didn't happen, though. So where do we pivot? We pivot to today's visit. And, guys, I'm just going to pat myself on the back for this one. I just am. I've posted it a couple of times now where you can see my tweets from 2 years ago where it says, Aiden Mahaney, you are a Creighton Blue Jay. So if I, by some miracle, because it's nothing is done yet, if I called this one 2 years ago, I don't know, to put me on staff, like, let me do it. I can poke around a Torvik page with the best of them. So Aiden Mahaney is a 2-year guard out of St. Mary's. He's kind of a combo guard, would probably play off ball for us. 33 minutes a game, 14 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. 81% from the stripe, 36% from 3 on 231 attempts. So volume shooter for a good fundamental program. He takes tough shots. His percentages are probably lower than they would be in our system. His true shooting isn't great, but again, the shot quality the shot volume he takes, I should say. you look at this guy and again, he's a Creighton Blue Jay. Like he is such a Creighton Blue Jay. So if we get him in, that's your Trey replacement in theory. He slots right into the 2. He could maybe play some small ball 3 if you needed him to. Like I think you're adding him regardless of what Trey does. Like you're trying to add him regardless, and you either figure out a way to play both of them at the same time, or or Trey leaves and then he's your 2. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about him. He's the number 32 ranked player in the portal. He's still young. He's still got 2 years of eligibility. So if he takes that sophomore jump, like you salivate over what that jump would look like for a guy like him that was so good right away. He's had 2 really good seasons now for a really good basketball team. So he's ready to play power conference ball. He's ready to start for Creighton. That sounds stupid to say when you look at the other teams that are recruiting him, right? Like UConn, I think, is going to be pretty heavily involved. The only reason I'm not super confident that we would get him in, because it looks like we're his first visit. He's visiting. He came in last night. He's visiting officially today on Monday, the 22nd. His recruiter from St. Mary's, his assistant coach recruiter at St. Mary's, is now on staff at Michigan. And I think that is where he's headed next, if I read the online stuff right. So if he's heading to a visit with Michigan, if it's his old recruiter who convinced him to get in the portal and that's where he's headed, that would not surprise me. I would think we're probably second behind them right now. I know UConn reached out. I think Kentucky and Kansas both reached out. I can't imagine him going to Kansas with the roster they have at this point. So if he gives another visit to one of those other teams, then maybe the calculus changes. For now, I would probably put us slightly behind Michigan to get him. But man, Michigan is adding the whole world. So if you want to come to a team that has a spot open and minutes available, I'd like to see him here. All right, so those were like my primary guys that I wanted to talk about in terms of stuff that's really happened in the last week or so since my last episode. So this is kind of the best of the rest, or guys that I've been keeping an eye on, or new entries to the portal. So Kobe Bray, however you say it, Dayton, 6'6" wing. His true shooting is 72.5. Shot 49%. I'll just round it up. He shot 50% from 3 on 201 attempts. I'll say that again in case you didn't hear it. A true shooting of 72.5. He shot 50% from 3, 49.8% on 200 attempts. So it stands to reason that his top 5 that he announced today is Duke, Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, UConn. Just the 5 bluest bloods right now. Like I held out hope because I'm looking at that and I'm saying, wow, come on, we need a 3. We're shooter U. Are we at least going to get, consideration? Yeah, no, it's clear the programs that want him, the caliber of programs that are going to get him. So that's fine. That's kind of a shame. But he does have his kind of poor man's but not that poor version, Max Shulga. So Max Shulga out of VCU, formerly of Utah State. He was Ashworth's teammate there, his counterpart in the guard room. Another 6'5". He's kind of more of a shooting guard, but can probably play a 3 if needed. He's the number 79 player in the portal by On3. 64% true shooting, which is still excellent. He averaged 14 a game for VCU in the A10 and shot 42% from 3 on volume. I don't have the exact number here, but it was at least 150 attempts. He's a super efficient player, good passer, decent rebounder considering his size and athleticism. Decent defender, too. That VCU team defended really well sometimes, I should say. But yeah, he held his own for being a white, unathletic-looking shooting guard. He's still new in the portal. I haven't heard anything about his recruitment yet. I would not be surprised if he would be a pivot for us if we don't get Mahaney or if Trey leaves. Paired pair him and Ashworth back together, like that would be. I would at least have a pretty good feeling about that. I think he's ready to step up a level. Like he looked good enough in the A10. He looked good enough in the Mountain West where you say, okay, he's ready to play a role on a major tournament team. Andrew Carr from Wake, I mentioned him in last week's. I don't think there's been anything new with him. I just want to keep him at the top of mind because he'd be such a cool addition, such an efficient player. It's one of those guys you look at and you say, like, if we had different circumstances, if we were looking for a 4, it looks like Rutgers and Villanova are the two that he's visited or visiting. So, I'd love to not see him end up at Villanova. Mason Gillis out of Purdue, so I couldn't say enough good things last week about him and how I think he's maybe being undervalued in the portal. Well, clearly not because he committed to Duke today. So they saw something they liked in him, and I imagine it was that 68% true shooting, maybe that 47% from 3. Of course, there's also the 0 points he put up in the national championship game, but that's another issue. So he's off the board for the Jays too. Another guy who could have, I think, filled the 3 seamlessly. New entry to the portal as of this weekend or sometime last week. Jaden Shutt out of Duke, 6'4", kind of just a guard, wing guard. He was a freshman this year, played very few minutes. He's out of the Chicagoland area. I actually got to see him play in high school a couple of times. Huge talent. But yeah, realized if he comes back, he's probably playing behind Flagg, playing behind other guys at Duke this year. So he's headed to the portal. Not enough in his numbers to say anything there. He's a big talent. We have given him a call. I would love it to just say, here's another young guy at a position where we don't currently have a young guy. Right? Like if he's playing the 3, you've got Davis, Johnson, him, Jason Green, and Trout or McAndrew, right? You look at that and you say, all right, that's a cool young core that we can build with for years to come, right? So yeah, he's a guy I'd be ecstatic if we could get him. I think his profile is a fantastic fit for us. Cade Tyson commits to UNC. He was the Belmont wing that I was really interested in. I think he's one of the best players in the portal. Aiden Holloway commits to Alabama from Auburn. He was another young guard. He played a lot this year though. I would have loved to see us get a shot at him. Let's see. Okay, so we've got some new interests on our part. I'll kind of go through those now. Felix Okpara from Ohio State. He is probably my favorite of the remaining options at the big spot in the portal that I think we could realistically be in on. He played 23 minutes a game for Ohio State this year, 7 points, 6 boards. So super efficient on the glass in limited minutes. The offense did not run through him at all when he was in. His usage is one of the lowest of the players I'm tracking. So you look at some of his numbers and say, 7 points a game. We could surely bring in something better than that if Kalk leaves. But he's the kind of guy I look at and I say, all right, he can rebound. He's a little more of an athletic big. He's still 70% at the rim though, so still super efficient at the rim. And he'd be a good complement to playing somebody like Trout at the 5, where you can kind of vary your looks or play one of them a little more often against better teams. I don't know if we'll be at the top of his list. I assume there will be a long list of people interested. But I do imagine we'll reach out, especially if Kalk's future is uncertain still. Davon Smith, I think that's how you say it. It's kind of a weird spelling in the first name. 6'0", 6-foot point guard out of Utah. The numbers for him jump off the page a little bit. 29 minutes, 13 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists for a 6-foot guard. 6 rebounds. Like that sticks out at you. You say, wow, okay, you're getting active on the glass. That's something that we usually count on from our guards. 7 assists is crazy numbers. One of the best passers in the country, one of the best decision makers in the country. Was very much a part of making that Utah team respectable this year. I think he's a very complete player. I think he's underrated. 41% from 3 on limited attempts. It's not the most effective finisher in the world, but 44% from the field. I can live with that. Another guy I don't think will be near the top in, but I'm glad to see that we showed interest. And you might say, why are we looking at point guards? Does that mean something about Ashworth? I don't think so. I think we are looking at guys who can help him out with the point guard duties or take them away entirely. I think we observed situations where Ashworth's best role was at the 2 this year. And I think we're preparing for a world where that happens if Trey leaves. The only thing I would think it means if we sign a point guard is that Ty Davis is redshirting. That's the only thing I would think if we do add a point guard. Speaking of which, Dalen Hall out of BYU. I got a decent report that we're linked to him in some way, shape, or form. Another guy, he's a 6'4" point guard out of BYU. 2 years of eligibility left. 29 minutes a game, 9 points, 5 assists. So he wasn't the most efficient player in the world, but at the same time, he's still got time. So I had also heard, I think he's headed out on a mission. So if he did decide to come our way, I don't know if we'd get him for a couple of years. Not positive how that works. But he was 36% from 3 on 150 attempts, 51% from 2, only 63% at the line, which is kind of weird. I could, like I said, I've heard we are somewhat involved. We'll see how that shakes out. And then the last 2 are kind of our remaining bigs that we've been reported interest in. So the first one is Churchill Abbas, who played 16 minutes a game at DePaul this year and didn't look very good in those 16 minutes. We supposedly reached out to him, or he put us on like his top schools list, something like that. So I don't know if we just had like an auto email to anyone who transfers from a Big East school, because I don't really see this. He's only 6'9". He plays kind of a true center. I don't know. We're apparently either we're involved with him or he thinks we're involved with him. At the very least, we made a call. And then there's Johan Traore out of UC Santa Barbara, a 6'11", kind of power forward center. This is another guy I think I could see as part of like a 2-man 5, like a split 5 kind of system with Trout. He had a very long heard from list. He's from UC Santa Barbara, but he spent his first year at Auburn. Not a super great defender and not much of a rebounder by possession-wise, but 14 points a game, nothing to shake your head at. If you need to pivot in an emergency to another 5 option, at least he's out there, right? You say like, I've seen centers with worse profiles, with worse numbers come in and be effective at Power 6 programs. So that's kind of a roundup of guys that we've been interested in and the guys that I am keeping an eye on pretty closely. We will have a lot. There's going to be, by necessity, by the end of next week, we will know a lot more about what our roster is going to look like next season. If I had said it last week that I'd be surprised if we didn't have at least one commit coming into my next episode. I'm a little surprised we don't, given the number of guys on this list that have new homes. But yeah, hope that the message that you should take from this is basically hope is not lost. There are still other guys that are going to enter the portal, and some of them will be impactful players that I think will be involved in. There's a few names as somebody floated, like Peyton Sanford might be leaving the draft and entering the portal. If that is the case, I speculated back before this season started that he's a guy that might be headed somewhere else soon. And I think we would get involved there again. That's kind of it fits exactly what we would need. I think there are others that we would be involved in if they moved on. So we are getting down to a point where we got to do something soon, probably. But my faith in the coaching staff's plan is not wavering. All the guys who I was a little confused why we were in on are going other places. So I'm really not going to be concerned about that. These are guys who in prior videos, in prior tweets, I'm saying like, if we don't get them, I'm not going to be too mad about it. So here I am not being mad about it, basically. But yeah, options are limited. Kalk coming back fixes most problems. Then all you really need to do is go out and get a wing or a guard and another player with potential, right? Like that's kind of what you'd be looking at. Now, if he leaves, yeah, things are going to get tough pretty quickly. I've said I have faith in Trout having a bounce back year and being able to play a pretty capable 5. But at the same time, you look around at some of these other teams that are getting stronger, that are adding, ridiculous. What Michigan has done in the portal, basically adding 3 bigs who all know at this point that they're not going to be sharing playing time evenly. So you see things like that and you wonder, what are we doing? We have historically been selective in the portal, and we've historically had a very good track record in the portal. So I still like our position. I like it less than I did a week ago. But if we come away with one of the bigger guys that I'm still monitoring, if we come away with a Mahaney or a Shulga or Shutt or something like that, or Okpara, I'll still feel pretty good about where we're headed, and there's still going to be more guys to enter the portal. So that's the message for today. We'll probably check in again after the deadline for entering the draft.